Guys, they finally did it. A loser of the mob vote isn't dead. It's been a couple weeks since Mojang announced the revival of the Copper Golem for Minecraft. More than most of the previous drops, this was very significant as it acts as the first time Mojang has brought back a mob that had lost the mob vote. For those of you that don't know, every few years Mojang used to hold a vote between 3 or 4 mobs and the winner would be added to the game. Instead of being a fun community event though, it was a war zone. People would be extremely frustrated every time their mob lost, and it led to a lot of fighting within the community. I lost my brother in the war. So that eventually led to Mojang discontinuing the mob vote after 2023. Now for years, Mojang claimed that the losers of the votes would be added to the game eventually, but it wasn't until the Copper Golem here that we actually got to see that, 8 years after the first mob vote. The community was very happy with this announcement, and so was I, since the Copper Golem was my second favorite loser of the bunch. But one thing that was very interesting about the Copper Golem announcement was the mechanics that came with it. That's because he works completely different from how he was said to work in the 2021 vote. Initially, his purpose was to randomly hit copper buttons, essentially being a glorified gambling machine. But now, he is instead used to organize items into chests with the use of the new copper chest. I really like this update as I think it'll end up being far more useful, but that also got me thinking back on the other 10 mob vote losers. If we are going to see them, how do I predict they would change to fit within the game? This is actually an idea suggested by a comment on my mob vote loser video after the announcement, and I thought it would be a really fun idea to go through each of the previous losers and discuss how likely I think they are to return and how I think they would change to work within the game today. And since the Copper Golem is coming out alongside a bunch of copper tools as well, I'll talk about what other features I could see coming with the mob. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. For this video, I thought it would make sense to cover the mobs in order of how likely I think they are. So we'll start with what I think is the least likely mob and end with the most. You may also notice that I'm not numbering these like I normally do, and that's because there's a decent chance Mojang announces another mob while I'm editing. If that does happen, I'll keep the segment for that mob in the video so we can see pretty quickly how correct I was. But starting off with the least likely, I think that honor goes to the Great Hunger from the 2017 vote. Now unlike every other mob vote, Mojang did say that every loser here isn't getting added to the game. With that said though, it's not like they signed a contract saying they had to kill these mobs permanently. A lot can change in 8 years, and that includes opinions on features. As an example, Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of the Super Smash Bros. Series, once said that he would never add Ridley from the Metroid franchise to the character roster because he was too big. But once Smash Ultimate came around, he was actually added. Did that make any sense to the Minecraft viewers, or is that like me explaining the FNAF lore to a Victorian child? Anyway, point is, Mojang can change their minds, so the 2017 mobs aren't off the table. I do think all 3 of them are the least likely to return, but definitely not impossible. But alright, what about the Great Hunger itself here? In the 2017 vote, it was initially described as being a hostile mob that would camouflage itself into the ground. Using its massive chomper, it would be able to eat any mob or item that went on top of it. The main appeal of the mob was the fact that it eating items would have some enchantment properties, namely being able to unenchant items. That would be incredibly annoying. Imagine finally getting a mending book to put on your tools and then suddenly... This might end up being more annoying than even the Phantom if implemented as is. The reason it was appealing initially was because it would have been the only way to remove enchantments, but now that the grindstone is in the game, this mob isn't really necessary. So how would I change it to fit within the game today? I didn't want to stray too far away from the enchantment abilities for this, and I think I came up with a decent idea here, though it's not perfect. The Great Hunger would have 2 states, a hostile state and a tamed state. In its hostile form, it would work very similar to how it was initially described, but instead of removing enchantments, it instead adds a curse enchantment to your tool, armor, or weapon. I feel like the curses are pretty underutilized right now, so maybe adding a few new curses along with the Great Hunger could be interesting. Stuff like double durability loss, mining fatigue, exploding, I don't know. Now that would still be quite annoying, so the actual use for the Great Hunger would have to be more helpful. That's where the tame state comes in. Not sure how it would be done, but if you do manage to tame it, then it would be able to remove enchantments, but more specifically, only the curses, since that's something the grindstone can't do. And also when it's in the tame state, I think you should be able to add enchantments to things as well. Maybe you feed it a book and the item of your choice and then he combines the 2. Obviously, we already have the anvil for that, but... If Mojang is so set on not removing that stupid limit, then I think the Great Hunger could at least be a way to get around it, which will especially be important if more enchantments get added to the game. The final note would just be making sure this mob is very rare, maybe only having it spawn in a specific biome or structure, because if it could spawn anywhere, that could easily lead to annoyance. Alright, the next mob I want to talk about is the Monster of the Ocean Depths. He's a lot simpler of a concept, which I think makes him much more likely. In the initial proposal, he would use his tongue to drag people into the ocean and drown them. Pretty violent for a Minecraft mob. I don't think that has to change we just have to come up with a good use for this guy. The problem with mobs like the Phantom is that they are much more annoying than they are useful. Phantom membranes are just used for a solid but niche potion and repairing elytras, which can also just be done with mending. There's a reason Phantom defenders talk about how to avoid them rather than how useful they are. So adding a new hostile ocean mob needs some sort of purpose to justify the risk of facing it. First off, I think it should only spawn in deep oceans and be pretty rare. If you get caught by one, I think it would be cool if you have to kill it while its tongue is attached to you, so you're basically put on a timer to get rid of it before you drown. But as for its drop, I think it should relate to its mouth. In the initial concept, Jeb mentions that the mob would be able to use its mouth to propel itself forward. What if you could get that mouth for yourself and use it to attach to boats to make them move faster? So while the mob would be a minor annoyance with ocean travel, killing it enough times would improve your movement speed immensely. Since the mouth is split into 4 parts, maybe you would have to kill the mob 4 times, and after collecting 4 mouth segments, you could add them to the boat in the crafting table. I also want to note that this would only speed up the boat in water. Ice travel would remain unchanged with this mob for reasons I'll get to later. But for our final mob of the 2017 vote, the one I think is the most likely is the hovering inferno. We didn't get a lot of details on him other than him acting as a boss version of the blaze and being a random encounter in the nether. So first off, for my changes, he's not going to be a random encounter anymore. Instead, alongside him, the nether fortress is going to be getting an update. Not a huge one, but I think a couple rooms could be added since the nether fortress has remained largely unchanged from when it was first released. I think adding some rooms that utilize the new nether brick blocks like red nether brick walls, and even chiseled nether brick would be cool. I mean, I forget this block exists half the time. But besides some fortress updates, what about the hovering inferno himself? I think he would spawn in one of these new rooms. Maybe it wouldn't be in every fortress, but if you're lucky enough to find one, you could begin the boss fight. He would attack in a similar way that Jeb described, using hovering plates as shields and having a shockwave attack. In fact, the hovering inferno was actually added to Minecraft Dungeons, so I think that game can give a decent idea of what the fight would look like. But what would this guy drop that would make the fight worthwhile? I imagine it would be pretty difficult, so it would have to be worth the trouble. My best idea would be it dropping its crown, which the player could wear. When worn, this wouldn't provide any armor protection. Wow, great item, Odyssey. Well, this would be like the elytra, where it's got a good use outside of defense. I think it would be cool if, when worn, anything you attack or mine would be instantly smelted. Sort of like a Midas touch, but instead of gold, it's fire. This is an enchantment idea I've had for quite a while, as I think it could be really good to say, get a ton of glass extremely quickly. Obviously though, instead of being an enchantment, it's tied to this crown, and as you mine or attack more things, it could quickly lose durability. I think that would fit very well with the mob's obvious heat theming. Now, one thing that was important to me was making sure that this wasn't too overpowered to make things like super smelters completely worthless. So I think the trade-off would be that this doesn't get repaired with mending. Instead, you'd have to use blaze rods to fix it. That way, it's a bit more of a trade-off since using it effectively would require a good blaze farm. I also think when it's out of durability, like the elytra, it wouldn't break, just get disabled until it's repaired. I think that would be a really cool item and would make it a fairly exciting addition. I also think if this is done, there should be some way to respawn the hovering inferno for the sake of multiplayer servers, probably also using end crystals. But with that, we can finally break out of the 2017 mobs and get into the 7 remaining mobs from the other years. As of right now, I think the least likely of this bunch is the Rascal from the 2021 vote. I think he's the least likely because he seems to be the most complicated and least fitting into the game based on his current proposed idea. As stated by Mojang, he'll hide in caves, so you'll have to try to find him hiding around. Whoa, wait, did you guys see that? If you find it 3 times, it would give you a prize. Now, the reward shown in the mob vote was just an enchanted pickaxe, which I don't think is that interesting. Honestly though, I do like the idea of the hide and seek minigame, so I think just making the reward worth the time investment would be all we need. Since he's not hostile, we don't have to worry about him being too annoying either, so the reward can be on the weaker side and doesn't even have to be a new item. Honestly, I think just having him give the player rare ores like diamonds or enchantment books would be fine enough. No, he wouldn't be the most exciting mob vote loser to join the game, but if added alongside maybe a new cave biome or something, then I think that's a substantial amount of content for a drop. Not all of these have to be completely game-changing. I mean, it's not like the mob vote winners in the game are anyway. The next mob in terms of likelihood for me is probably the Tough Golem from 2022, purely because we were already getting a golem with the Copper Golem. This guy's use was definitely a bit weaker, but still kinda cool. It would be able to display items, and the player could either have them move around or stand still. Based on this use, it would be purely decorative, which I don't really mind, but I feel like they would try to expand upon it. First off, to summon it, I'm sure it'll be the same as the Copper Golem, where you have to place a carved pumpkin onto either tuff or polished tuff. Now, I was really struggling to come up with what that other use could be. Maybe on top of customizing if it's moving or frozen, you could control where it's holding the item as well. So maybe you could have it hold the item over its head and then surround the golem in blocks, making it look like the item is just on display without any mob present. And of course, the item wouldn't despawn. Aside from that though, I couldn't really think of a more practical use. In Minecraft, just getting new ways to decorate is always great though, so I think this would be fine. I do predict Mojang would add more to it, I'm just not sure what. So as of now, that's what I've got for this guy. Now this next segment is going to be a bit interesting as we've got a 2-in-1. I'm going to do a hard read that Mojang will add both the iceologer and penguin in the same drop. drop or update. Why do I think that? Take a guess. Since they're both cold related mobs, I think it would make sense to add them alongside some updates to the colder biomes. Of the two, I do think the penguin is more likely, but I don't think the iceologer is too far behind. Both would be able to spawn in most of the cold biomes. The iceologer would only spawn at night, or maybe also spawn around igloos. Now we got very little on what the iceologer would do, beside the fact that we know he would attack using ice, which we could see him do in Minecraft dungeons. So we kinda have to come up with what we get from the iceologer ourselves. I think blue ice, or at least one of the ice types being one of the drops, is a given, which could already make it helpful in farming the resource. The other drop could possibly be something used to tame the penguin, which is partially why I think the two mobs would work well being added together. As for the penguin, its stated use was that it would be able to help push boats and make them move faster. I think in order to get this ability, it makes sense that the penguin would have to be tamed. That would also allow the penguin to teleport to their owner, which would make it so much easier to use them so you wouldn't have to drag them across massive stretches of land. Now if you remember from earlier in the video, I mentioned that the monster of the ocean depths would also help with boat speed. Wouldn't it be kind of redundant to have two mobs do that? First off, I could easily see the monster of the ocean depths just not getting it at all, so there's no need to change the penguin around that. But also, this is why I held off on mentioning ice boats until now. If you didn't know, using a boat on top of ice allows you to move incredibly fast, making it one of the quickest methods of transport in the game. While the monster of the ocean depths wouldn't help with ice travel, I think the penguin would. If you put a boat on ice, the penguin would be able to slide and push behind you, sort of like Mario sliding with the penguin suit. Not only would that be pretty useful to make this method of transport even faster, but it would work well with the iceologer dropping blue ice so you can create more roads. Now I do know a lot of people have problems with the ice boat method existing for transport. Why? People say it's overpowered, but I don't see why because it takes a lot of setup time, so the reward should be worth it. It definitely seems like one of those points people just make up as a problem because they need their Minecraft hate video to be longer. If people have such a problem with it, I guess they can make it so penguins are required for iceboat travel to work, period, but I really don't think that's necessary. Oh, and the penguin would still 100% work in the water, but if both it and the monster of the ocean depths are added how I described, I think the latter's boost would be stronger due to the higher risk involved with getting it. But now we have reached the mob that I personally want to return the most, the crab from the 2023 vote. If you want my full list, by the way, on which mobs I'd personally like to see first instead of the likelihood, you can check out that ranking. Anyway, I think the crab is going to be my least changed mob of the video because I genuinely can't think of any way to make this mob more useful while still making sense as a crab. From what we know, it would be able to drop its claw, and then the player could use the claw to get extended reach. This is extraordinarily helpful. I'm sure everyone has built something and wish they could just reach a little further to speed up the process. In fact, this is probably the single most useful ability a mob vote mob has been stated to have. But you all just had to get your wolf farmers so your dog can still just sit there. Looking at you, brother. It was me who killed him. But as I said, I can't see Mojang changing this use because if they do, I think it would just lead to hate. The copper golem they were fine to change because item sorting is a lot more valuable than a randomizer, and it's still possible to easily make a randomizer using redstone. If the crab gets a different use though, there's no replacement for the extended reach property, and since that would be very helpful, the new use would just be an annoyance. The only thing I could think of adding on is that the extended reach also extends to combat and mining, but overall, I think the use should remain the same. As for the mob I think is the second most likely, we got the Moo Bloom. As much as I would love the crab more, I get the vibe from Mojang that they'd rather add the cutesy flower cow first, especially since it would be very easy to implement due to basically just being a retextured mushroom. The Moo Bloom has shown up in other things like Minecraft Earth and even a Lego set, so I think Mojang is absolutely not forgotten about this guy. But unfortunately, the Moo Bloom was another mob that they really gave no details on how it would work. They said it would be friends with bees, and that's it. Yeah, so we've definitely got to expand on that. First off, I think it would be great if the Moo Bloom came in several different colors to match the game's different flowers. Even if it's only the single tall one so they could fit on its back, that would give a large variety of colors. Now to find the Moo Bloom, I think it would have to be a very rare mob. The standard animals in Minecraft are pretty normal for the real world, so throwing in a Moo Bloom as a common encounter may be a bit weird. I mean, people were against Mojang making blue sheep spawn naturally only a couple months ago, so a yellow cow would probably also make people push back against it. The mushroom works because it only spawns on a weird rare island, so I think the Moo Bloom could be similar with a new rare flower-based island instead. This could introduce a whole bunch of new flowers with it, and I'd particularly love if we got more colors for the flat flowers. Right now we just have wildflowers and pink petals, so getting them in other colors like red and blue would be fantastic. If they don't want to do a whole new biome though, cows getting struck by lightning could definitely work too. I also think feeding a flower to the Moo Bloom to change its type should be implemented as well. But what about its usage with bees? Well, this is where the mob's main use comes in. Like a mushroom, you'd be able to shear a Moo Bloom to get the flowers on its back, but but instead of it reverting to a normal cow afterward, it would maintain its color. After interacting with a bee enough, the flowers on its back would grow back once more. So this would essentially act as a flower farm without using bone meal. This could even be automated using dispensers with shears, which I think would be fantastic, especially for flowers like the torch flower and wither rose, which are much harder to farm. To get the Moo Bloom of that type, it would still require you to get a sniffer or the wither to feed the flower to it in the first place, so I think this could be a pretty solid addition. Plus, just getting a ton of different cow colors would be cute, and I think Mojang would want to do that. But as for the mob I think is currently the most likely for Mojang to add, it's the guy I wanted the least. The glare from the 2021 vote has always been extremely lame to me. Unfortunately though, the reason I think it's most likely to come next is simply because it seems like Mojang is straight up hinting at it. At the end of the Copper Golem showcase video, Agnes says,
Did we place any torches on our way here?
This could just be a small joke, but it reads as a hint towards the glare because A, they were hinting to the Copper Golem like crazy before it was announced, and B, lighting is what the glare was all about. In the original proposal, it would fly over to spots that are dark enough for mobs to spawn. Now the reason I think this is lame is because we could already tell that by simply looking at the light level in the F3 menu, and also just using our eyes. But as many people pointed out in the comments, Bedrock Edition doesn't have the ability to check the light level with an F3 menu. Maybe you all should play Java instead. So since this would be a pretty lame addition for basically every Java player if implemented as is, I think they'll change it somewhat. It's still definitely going to be light-based if the hint is anything to go by, but I think it's also going to directly help with lighting up areas now. You would first have to tame the glare, but after you do so, it would either fly around placing some sort of lighting block, or maybe it could even just make the area glow on its own without any visible lighting block, which could be very nice for building since lighting is always a massive hassle when trying to make something look nice. Of the two though, I definitely think it placing a lighting block of some kind is most likely, so hopefully if it does come out, it would bring some new lighting blocks with it since a variety is always appreciated. Yeah, I still don't think this is the most exciting addition, but hey, it's at least a lot better than what was initially proposed. But anyways, that's it for this video. Are you mad it didn't include termites despite them being a biome vote mob? Let me know in the comments. I had a lot of fun coming up with these ideas, and I can't wait to see how these pan out over the next few years. I think the hovering inferno and the Moo Bloom are probably my favorite ideas I came up with, though I'm still definitely hoping the crab comes first. But before I go, I've got to thank my members being Mario Master 101, Maidzio2, Fredbear's Diner, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Luma, Blessed Tiger, Yanni the Duck, Wyatt Derpy, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Kid Trunks 15, Caddy Shroom, Enchanted Skull, SMA, B Major 2003, Arson the Ratboot, Sir Moosty, Belandor, Diluted Colors, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Pronto Clone, Thicky Reiki, Ingenio TM, CW McCain, Tibby, JubeTube Tesseract, Mr. McMahon 5702, Jameson Pageson, Golden Sand 15, Z Frost, Stuffy Ant, Just Tex, Conkanut Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.